Methodist Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. And my folks lived at 818 South 33rd Street. And when I was 6 months old, we moved to 3014 South 34th Street.
How can she remember this date?
And
Is that the one we drove by?
Yeah.
That's the house we drove by about 6 months ago?
you've got your hands up in front of your face.
Is that the house we drove by?
That is the house where I lived until we were married. I was 6 months old when I moved there, and I lived there till I was 21 years old and got married. I went from kindergarten through 8th grade at Windsor School, and I was, in those days, I was a midterm student. In other words, I started in January because my birthday was in March. And consequently, I was graduating from, I was graduating from my director.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I graduated from the 8th grade and supposedly in January. Everybody in my class either went to Technical High or South High, which was on a trimester thing. So I was going to be the only one left at Windsor School.
Because you were slower than the rest of them?
Yeah. I was the only one left at Windsor School
Oh.
in November, and classes didn't start at Central High School until January.
Oh.
So I went to Tech High.
I never knew that.
I went to
I
Tech
never knew
High
that.
from November until the middle of January, and then I transferred to Central High School.
Really?
And all my friends were half a grade ahead of me. And so I took extra subjects 1 year, and I graduated from Central High School in 3.5 years in 1939. And I went over to visit my grandmother in Newton, Iowa. And while I was there, I got a call from my folks, and they had a temporary job for me at the telephone company, Northwestern Bell in Omaha. So I came back from Newton, and I worked that whole summer on a temporary job at the telephone company. And by the time that was completed, there was an opening in the service department, service bureau of the telephone company. So I went to work full-time for Northwestern Bell. And I was in that department for 2 years, and then I transferred down to the plant department with Northwestern Bell. I worked there till October of 1943, which was after we were married. I met...
Now, did your dad work?
What?
Was your dad working at Northwestern?
Yes, my dad was working there then, too.
At
He
the
was
time.
in the plant department also.
What did he do?
And
What was his job?
he was in charge of
Safety.
the blueprints in the plant engineering department at that time. Anyhow, I hope you're recording this.
Yeah,
Well, I don't need a director over here.
well, should we remove this,
Yeah,
this
make it
nuisance
go
from the
around.
room?
Anyhow, Dad worked
By the way, she's making reference to her love of 50 years.
yeah.
I gotta hear this.
You asked me if Dad he worked at the telephone company, and he worked at the telephone company after I quit. I mean, when did he retire? Do you remember, Mike?
It's about 1947 or so, wasn't it? right?
Yeah, something like that. Which is a whole nother story.
And he'd worked there his whole lifetime, hadn't he?
Yes, he worked there for 46 years.
46 years,
That
wow.
was Northwestern Bell. How
Well,
did
he
I
said
meet
you'd
Grandpa? You wanted to know. After I graduated from high school and I went to work for a telephone company, we had, when I was a freshman in high school, gone down one Sunday to Oregon, Missouri to look up some of my father's relatives. And we went into this cafe and there was an older lady in there. And we asked her if she knew anything about the Price girls that used to live in Oregon, Missouri. And she said, well, yes, Mary was married to Dwight Meyer and lived on the road on the highway north of Mountain City. And Emma was married to, what was his, Philbrick's name?
Philbrick.
Yeah, Philbrick. And they ran a hotel in Forest City. And, what was the other one? Well, the other
Alice, wasn't it?
Alice was in Kansas City. Well, we went over to Forest
And in what relationship were they to the Price?
Well, my father, when he was a young man, went with his mother to Oregon, Missouri, to visit India Price, a cousin. And so that's why he was down there trying to look it up. And I don't know what that relationship was. But anyhow, we ended up then on the farm north of Mound City, and they had a daughter my age, and we hit it off right
Mary Ann.
now. Mary Ann. And so, consequently, all through high school, and after I first started working, I used to go down there and spend, well, during high school I spent 2 or 3 weeks in the summertime, and after I started working I'd go down for the weekend to be with Mary Ann.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that Grandpa, her father, Meyer Augustus, was a cousin of Mary Ann's.
On the other side
So
of the family.
that's how we met, actually, at some of the regular Sunday get-togethers of all these families.
Of the Meyer family, yeah.
Go from farm to farm, and everybody brought something, but they got together about every Sunday, didn't they? Well, I probably didn't see him again then after we had that one day, and it was very foggy, I don't remember much about it. Probably because he went to play baseball, and I went to work. But after the war started and he went to work for Glenn L. Martin, that's World War II, by the way.
The big one.
Yeah, the big one, the one to end all wars.
Yeah.
But anyhow, after he went to work for Glenn L. Martin and was transferred back to Omaha, then M. Alice Meyer, who was Mary Ann's sister, suggested he call me for a date. So he did, and we started going out in February of 1943.
Was this was in Omaha?
43, and we were married on June 27th of 1943.
My goodness.
My goodness, what do you mean, my goodness?
Well, that didn't take long.
Yeah, that lasted for 50 years, so I guess it was long enough. So, after we were married, I was counting up last night. We've lived in 10 different places in the last 50 years. You've lived in 10 different places the last 25, but
That's true.
but we started out in 2 rooms. It was a boarding house at 3335 Harney, and there was no kitchen or anything, so we moved to an apartment at 3624 Dewey, which was formerly the maid's quarters of Dr. Simmons' home, and it was up 3 flights of steps. I remember that. And then we moved to an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment at 3117 Pacific. And after Carol was born,
There.
we lived there when she was born, and after Carol was born, we rented a 2-bedroom house at 1114 South 54th Street, which is where Jim stuck his head out and hit the fire plug and fell out of the bedroom window, and all of these. We had a fire in that house that knocked we had a fire because the chimney burned out. We also were struck by lightning in that house, knocked the chimney off of the house. But it was a nice little house, and we lived there when Jim and Linda were both born. And in 1950, we were transferred to Hastings, Nebraska. And Mike had the territory in Hastings, Nebraska. So he was gone from Monday morning until Friday night every week. We first rented a house on 4th Street,
144.
144 East 4th Street. And then a couple from Omaha that we got acquainted with. I mean, we knew more or less indirectly. Were transferred out, and so we bought their house at 217 East 7th Street in Hastings. They
207.
and Gordon McAllister.
207 East 7th.
207. I said corrected. Anyhow, we lived there until summer 1952 when we moved back to Omaha and rented a house in Benson. And we were in that house for 2 years, and then we bought a house on Leavenworth Street, which kind of put us back in the same neighborhood as we were when Jim and Linda were born. We lived in that house for 15 and a half years, and
Well, the kids all,
and then we built a house in Miracle Hills.
Remember all those numbers.
Well, I don't know. I think about numbers.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we lived there, and we sold the house and moved in with Jim and Mary for a month because our house wasn't finished. But we built down on the lake in Candlewood, which is where we live right now.
moved in there in November of 78.
Right?
November of 78.
Yes, that day before Thanksgiving Day of 1978.
Tell me about your dad. You know,
My dad?
About your dad. Yeah, just, you know.
Well, my dad was the youngest of quite a few children. One sister died when she was 14. He had a sister, Bessie, who was probably 16 years older than he, and a brother, Charles, who was 17 years older.
Really? So was he the baby of the family?
Yes, he was the baby of the family.
Uh-huh.
Well, yes, he was the youngest, so
What?
his parents were old, and he was almost 42 years old when I was born.
Wow.
So consequently, you've got a long spread in generation.
Did you ever know your
I
grandparents?
did not know my grandfather Dunham. He was born in 1836.
Wow.
And my grandmother Dunham was born in 1839. And they were married in 1865. My grandfather Dunham, his name was Martin Van Buren Dunham,
Really?
came from the East Coast on horseback in 1957, first to Iowa and then on to Omaha. My grandmother had already come from the East Coast by covered wagon in 1855. So they met in Omaha and were married. My grandfather, Martin Van Buren Dunham, was a member of the territorial legislature when
Really?
Nebraska was still a territory. He was past master after Nebraska became a state. He was past master of the Masonic Lodge, Nebraska Masonic Lodge. I did not know him. My grandmother Dunham, they were the ones that lived at 818 South 33rd Street, and that's where the folks lived when I was born. And then when they moved on South 34th Street, Grandma Dunham moved with them. They took care of her. She died in a fire in that house.
Oh, really?
In 1924. she had evidently gone into a closet, a walk-in closet. She always carried a candle. And she had gone into that closet with a candle, evidently to look for something. And she must have had a heart attack or something and fell and set the house on fire, and she burned to death in the house.
Wow. She was alone at the time in the house?
My mother was down in the basement canning. They had a burner downstairs, and she was canning. So that was a real tragic thing.
Well, I guess.
I kind of got off.
Well, what do you remember most about your dad? What was he like?
He was a very difficult person. He was very opinionated, and he was really kind of antisocial.
Really?
I always felt like he came too late in my grandparents' life, and he was always kind of put down and run into the ground. Now, don't ask me why, but I think he was. He worked for the telephone company for 4 other things. Busy. Born in Iowa, and said she was born in 1880, and she had 2 brothers. Mother was the oldest, and then Walter was 2 years younger, and Harold was 2 years younger than that. Her parents were Lily Chuliam McCord, and her father was Edgar Dean Finch. The Finches were English. The McCords were Scotch-Irish, is what they always said, but they were some of the Scotch farmers that were sent over to Northern Ireland to farm when England began their rule over there.
Huh.
I don't have any idea how they got to America or how they got to Newton, Ireland. But the Finches were English, and the McCords were Scotch-Irish.
Dunham was almost
The Dunhams were,
almost
the
entire
Dunham
England.
family has actually been traced